Thanks for dropping into the AIRDROP Show. My name is Caleb. On the internet, I go by Phosphorus. The AIRDROP Show is a show for NFT enthusiasts, artists, and creators alike who are eager to find the next big thing and want to get behind the scenes of what's happening in NFTs. Today we're talking with Jake Freid, a SuperRare NFT artist who's had his art sold at Christie's, and I just found this out, he was actually in the PROOF Grails II collection, which is really awesome. I'm really proud and happy for him. Jake describes his work as destroying and reworking the same image over and over again to create a highly detailed 1-minute mind-bending animation. Let me tell you, his work is mind-bending. Today on the podcast, we talk about how Jake completes his work. We talk about his jump into NFTs and Web3. And lastly, we talk about what he tells his students about how to think about their art. Before we drop in, this is your daily reminder to please subscribe to the show to keep finding new and upcoming artists. And you can find us on Twitter at AIRDROP Show, and you can find Jake at Jake J. Freid. That's Jake J. F-R-I-E-D on Twitter. Make sure you go follow and support. And without any further ado, let's drop in. All right, everybody. Today we have a really special guest. We have Jake Freid. Thank you so much for coming on with us. I have a real quick question to get us started off here. You have a love of museums. What is it about museums that really gets your artistic juices flowing?
Sure. I mean, obviously they're a great place to take in work from a lot of different artists at the same time. So typically in a gallery, right, you're just getting one show. And art museums come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, a lot of them have informed my work, and I love a lot of different museums. But yeah, just growing up, going to the art museum is when you really click into like what art is, the history of it, how you can engage with it in different ways, and just sort of like have it all in one place. And then in my life, like obviously they've been really important to me. And then I ended up working for over 10 years at the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston. So it became my home, right? I would go there every day. I actually moved specifically back to Boston. It's a longer story, but like right across the park from the museum, so I could be close to it as an artist. And I was studying art history, and ended up teaching at the museum. And yeah, I mean, the museums and the art is always there for people to go in and out. And I know, having worked at one, that most people go to museums as tourists or once or twice in their life. But to be at an encyclopedic collection and go every day and see it change and really have longer term relationships with the work is pretty special. And as an artist, it's huge, because ultimately I'm trying to make work that I think at least is having a conversation with what came before me and might be worthy of being in that place long term. I recommend people go to art museums. And again, being in the NFT space, it's always interesting when you talk about in real life stuff versus virtual stuff. But I obviously like going to a museum physically is an amazing experience. And now with virtual technology, I mean, you can actually kind of go to a lot of great museums online, and I don't think it's exactly the same, but you can get a lot of the same kind of education and information and inspiration.
Yeah, there is something about going to a museum and seeing art from 100, 200, 300 years ago and really being able to relish in that. And I think now with NFTs, we have a similar capability in front of us with art on the blockchain.
That's kind of one of the big reasons I got into it, especially with digital work. So it's a long story, but my work is hand drawn. It's like made physically, but I scan and photograph the images and destroy them and rework them to create these moving animations and kind of like moving paintings. So my work is physical, but it's destroyed when I make it. So it's sort of like there's just a digital record of this process. So as an artist, thinking long term about the preservation of my work and like how it's consumed, it's been an interesting ride, right? Like my work evolved as like the internet evolved, and as streaming evolved, and as smartphones evolved and social media evolved. So none of us know exactly where it's going, but there was no authentic way of like having a digital asset that could be preserved and protected, which is, raised all sorts of interesting things in my career. But with NFTs and the blockchain, you actually can do that. And I don't think it's really at this point like a wild leap of imagination to think that the blockchain will be around in 100 years and hundreds of years, and is sort of like the best long-term kind of like preservation that we have in this digital age. It's really cool. We're just at the beginning of it, which is kind of wild, right? So I just mentioned my first work a little more than a year ago, and talking about hundreds of years from now already. But That's kind of where it's at, because a lot of the work that I've been making this work for, 10, 15 years. And it's been, with all the conversations we're having in the space right now, it's been freely shared, stolen. What is ownership of it? I've licensed it. People can buy it, but do they really, really buy it? What does it mean to own it? What is ownership? What is art? All those big questions. So yeah, it's really cool. And I like that my work is part of that book.
All right, so let's dive into the work, because it is amazing. First time I saw it, I was literally blown away. They're fast moving images, and it just, all I saw was black and white as it's frame by frame, that the image evolves as it moves forward. If you're watching this, I'm definitely going to show it. If you're listening, I need you to go to the description and look this stuff up, because you have to see it to believe it. And from what I've gathered, it's just a single piece of parchment, paper, bright backing, and it's all done with ink and whiteout.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. So it's a very simple process to explain, but the repercussions and what comes out of it can be really kind of complicated. Like you're saying, it's visual art. You have to see it to understand what we're talking about. So yeah, if you hear this interview, please check out the work. Most of it's very short, and obviously you can look at it for a long time. But once you see it for a few seconds, you kind of understand what I'm doing. It's one drawing basically on a sheet of paper, and yeah, I'll draw an image, I'll scan it, then I'll rework or draw over it or paint it out, scan that, then rework on top of that and scan it, rework on top of that. So it's animation in sort of this progressive way on one sheet. So not frame by frame with multiple kind of flipbook animation. But basically, it's like a time lapse of a painting. That's how my work evolved. I started as a painter, and I just kept changing and reworking my paintings. And ultimately, I realized I'm just more interested in that evolution of the image, and kind of finding the image as you make it, rather than making a painting, making an image that's just a still image. So it's basically a time lapse of everyone. We've seen a bunch of this, right? Someone's building a drawing up from nothing into the final piece, but instead of finishing it, it just keeps going forever and keeps adding to it. And I work on my pieces from 6 months to a year on these things, and they ultimately mostly become these 1 minute loops that are really dense. So it's one drawing that I rework for a year to make a 1 minute animation is essentially what I tell people. What's cool about NFTs and digital space is that the work is really much more than that. I always say that's the most condensed form of what I'm making, kind of taking this whole drawing that I put together over the course of a year into 1 minute, as fast as it could be. But now that we can kind of break it apart or fractionalize it, we're playing with that. A couple months ago, I released the Night Vision series, which is actually taking one of my films that I sold on SuperRare and breaking it up into the individual drawings. Oh. And so it's a collection. You can see every drawing from the first blank page all the way to the last crusty piece, a year later, and titled each one. The work is video, but it's also just a sequence of images. My work's really funky like that, where I'm a physical artist. I had success, I had a traditional career. I'm a professor of animation. I've had I just posted this recently, but since 2013, I've had 200 exhibitions or festivals or, screenings and stuff. But until kind of the Web3 NFT space, it was very difficult to monetize the kind of work that I'm making, because it's right click save, right? And to be an artist, experimental animator, you don't get paid a lot of money to do film festivals or gallery shows. And to sell the work is really tricky. You got to do editions through galleries. So again, any artists who are out there pre this era, I would have, and I resisted signing with the gallery, having them sell my videos, an edition of 5, taking 50% of all the profits. I'll never get royalties on them. And their copyright, they get taken offline or they're owned by people. So it's completely the antithesis of what I'm about. So I've made my career by teaching and by licensing my work to specific, TV programs or bands and performances, just kind of holding on to them. But it's been a very exciting year to see this all change and evolve. So yeah, since then, again, I had work at Art Basel in Miami, that was with SuperRare, and then I just had my first piece auctioned at Christie's in June. Everything's clicking with the kind of work I've been making for 15 years, and it's very cool.
How does that feel as an artist? The technology almost caught up to what you were doing.
Yeah, so honestly, it feels like I knew this was going to happen kind of thing. I didn't know in what form, but it was kind of obvious that, and everyone says this now, it's digital art is some of what is happening in the art world and what artists are doing. And culture goes where it wants to go, and like that's where it's at. And as an artist who works at a museum and as an educator who works with young people, we don't want to separate the museum from like, right, we've already had pop art, like at this point, like what, 80 years ago, like we've already made the mind click that like, wow, popular culture and like fine art have a conversation. And like, I watch Netflix, like my work is like art and in museums, but like I also license it to like Netflix shows and like music concerts. There's something really democratizing about the internet and art. And I've always had like one foot in like, I teach it in a university and at a museum, but I'm also like an artist who is online and like putting my work on YouTube and having people comment it on Instagram. So in my mind, like the art world is going this way anyways. It just took sort of this, it's really the cryptos thing, which it's still, I think, a lot, the barrier to a lot of artists getting into the space or understanding it. And for me too, like before really NFTs, like I did not care very much about Bitcoin or crypto. But now that I'm in it and understand how this market works, like it's actually like that is the breakthrough. It's all on chain and like the blockchain, and that it's like an open, trustless ledger. I've always been confident that my work was important. I've got enough feedback about it and like, enough success from it. And I personally like really believe in the work that I make. I put a lot of effort into it. It's like my life's work, my mission. It's what I do every day. It's very important to me. I'd say like this commercial or like social economic success is really exciting and unexpected. And I'm entering my late 30s now. So just like the life cycle of an artist, like my 20s was about like finding myself and my voice and really grinding and like honing my craft and developing a really unique process and like point of view. And again, hopefully to make work that's like uniquely mine. Then getting a job teaching and like, getting married. And I had my first kid a few years ago. And then COVID happened, and like everybody, like it sort of makes you take stock of what's going on. Right. And I had a young kid. I was making this work, and I was basically trapped at home, and I wasn't going out. I was teaching from home, and it's sort of like I have this great work. Like I deserve to make this work and like not stress about teaching and like be able to raise my kid. And like it's not selling out, but it's like there's an opportunity to really like make a market around your work and like move to the next level of being like a professional artist, which every artist has to figure out what that means for themselves. I never wanted to like sell merch. I never wanted to do, I've done commissions like for Harley Davidson and stuff, but like that's not really what I want to do. I just want to make my work. And I feel like the circumstances of COVID, Web3, and just like my life led to like, let's embrace this new technology. And I hope I'm like setting a tone for what's possible in the space and the level of quality, and like that this is a place where serious art and like culture can have a conversation. Obviously, we're going through kind of like a bear market or a downturn and all that stuff, but like I don't have doubts long term that like what this space is going to be evolving into like where a lot of the creative conversation and like cultural conversations are happening.
100%. There's this weird perfect storm that's currently going on, and you're in the middle of it, having done a lot of this work previous. Like you did the grind, you put stuff together. Story after story I listen to, it's COVID in the artist. There's something that happened there. And a lot of us got a wake-up call, or there was something, and now this crypto bull run, and now NFTs, and now we're in it, and now this crash, and everyone was like, okay, maybe it's over. But now I think it's almost good because we're seeing the artists who are here to stay, the ones who believe in themselves and their work and what they're doing, are staying, and the work is only getting better.
Yeah, I saw this coming too. I mean, right, like last year, people were saying like PFP, still a thing, still going to be around, but like clearly there was I don't know what the word is, like an exuberance about it. And like It was just so big, it was clouding out a lot of the art that was happening. But yeah, it started with art, and like art is obviously talking about museums again, like there are cultural waves, and like we see these meme collections go up and down, but like let's think like more than like 6 months to a year, like what actually matters and lasts. And I've seen, again, like you said, like my work's been online now for like 15 years, and like it's still relevant, and we're going to keep going through waves. Like you're saying too, like I was part of that. I think we're all riding that, there's a collective unconscious, and we're all riding that same cultural wave. But like Instagram just sort of like right when COVID was hitting, it's like, what is Instagram for anyway? Like more like, what are we doing? And like a lot of artists are grinding for, and even I teach portfolio classes at art school. And it's like, I went through the wave of teaching them to like make their portfolio website, like send things to being like, it's all about Instagram, man, to DM your favorite studios, pin it to the top. And that's how people actually got jobs. And then all of a sudden it became like, everyone's just hustling for like 5 seconds of attention and likes and follows. And like, it's not translating into like art communities, like growing or real conversations or anything beyond. Right. And now, I mean, I'm using Instagram as like sort of a metaphor for like how we consume art online and everything. But like when I go to Instagram now, I find it very difficult. I don't know. It's like just like wild and like overwhelming and uncurated and not what I remember it being, I guess, like where I would just go look at dope artists. Like I just followed artists and looked at their work. Like that was it.
And I think, I mean, we look back when Instagram really did change the game, right? It was an app made for photographers. Right. And we saw this big wave, and all waves have ups and downs. And they might be experiencing a down right now. That's maybe a personal thing everyone's talking about it currently. But as somebody who's looking at a younger generation who's thinking about how do they get their art out there, now you're in this NFT space. What are you thinking about how artists can leverage this new space? What are some maybe practical 1, 2, 3s that somebody can do to get in?
Yeah. What I always tell my students, so whenever I'm asked for like advice about Web3, I just think about what I teach my students. And it's like, it's the same lessons apply to life really as to this space too. And the big picture is learn how to navigate the world rather than navigating any specific space. Because what's going on right now is not going to be what's going on in 5 years. I never did this before. It's new for everyone who's in it, right? But the big lesson you learn as an artist is like network really matters. Like it's ultimately about people. And especially in the internet, you can forget that like there's real people behind all this stuff. But when you're in school and you're a young artist, like the most important thing you can do is like make connections with other artists, reach out to artists that you admire who like can be mentors for you. Like go to museums, go to gallery shows, go to festivals, like see what's out there, be a part of like the real world and have a conversation as an artist. And then like if you want to get work or you want your work to be seen, like it's not hard. You're already like in it. Like there's that community is there. So my big thing for people entering the space is like find your communities and actually be a part of it and like help each other out and don't treat it as sort of like a solo grind and it's just you and like you're looking for people to collect your work.
Right.
It's hard for me to know, like you're saying, because I had like a kind of a practice defined before this all started, but I am wary of like make a separation as an artist between like your journey as an artist and your journey as like selling work, and that sales don't define your work. Like same thing with social media, right? Like likes and follows and sales like don't define you and what's working. And it's really hard to be a unique artist with something to say that has like, it takes that 10,000 hours. So just like be patient and really put in the work and be really authentic and don't expect a lot of like gratification or reward. Doing the work itself has to be the gratification. I think everyone's got to find their own way too. But like, yeah, obviously the big thing is like work really hard and like put a lot of effort in and take a lot of risks and try to be unique. This is like, be uniquely you. Make work that no one else can make but you.
On that point, how did you find this? I feel like your style is really unique. It probably didn't start black and white. How did you find this uniqueness in what you're doing?
Yeah, so I tell my journey is long. I mean, like I started as an artist as like, I always tell people kind of like a teenage, like an angsty teenager having an existential crisis. I think that's where a lot of art and creativity comes from in young people. I see that in my students clearly. So like most of my art was just like an outlet, a raw, pure, like, it's like my diary, right? Like I had to draw. That's what art was. And then as you like mature and like learn about, you know, form and history and conceptual theory, and you go to all these different places. And so, yeah, I studied painting in college. Like I studied art history and like I was doing oil painting and really large scale stuff. And I reached a point where like for me, art making was coming back to like, it really was about losing myself in the process and feeling like I'm finding myself or discovering something that's bigger than me or I didn't know. So kind of that spiritual approach to art making. And that's what led to this time-based stuff where it was like, it was just changing. And then I kind of came to home base where it was like, painting is really crazy to do for what I do because it's, I'm reworking something. There's a lot of glare. It's like messy and I'm trying to do something long-term and lighting. And so it just sort of like simplified itself down into like drawing. Whiteout was sort of like a happy act. Like once I started using whiteout for something, I was like, whoa, this dries really fast. It's like I can draw on top of it. It's made for that. It's cheap. I can go buy it across the street. And it's like, whoa. And if you go through my work, you can sort of see how I arrived at where I'm at now, where it's like very fine pen and ink and whiteout, kind of refined stuff that I've been working with. This is there's a whole conversation right now about like an artist needs to stick to a style or not. And like, and really that conversation kind of makes me like want to laugh. Like it's so dumbed down, but let me just say like style is a stupid word because it's not about like the way it looks. It's more about like your artistic voice. Like think about yourself as like a director, as an auteur, like you're a human being. So like your work should have the tie of it's all coming from the same person and the same mind. So like most artists find this like through line where like they're exploring their work technique, they're exploring ideas, and one piece sort of like leads to the next one. That's where I'm at now. So it's like, I don't think of myself as having a style as much as I have like an approach and a practice, and I'm a human being. Like I'm evolving as a person. Right. So like you're going to see like an evolution of my work over time.
Yeah.
But I think so young artists who are minting work, they're like my style's all over the place. It's like, yeah, maybe that's where like selling work becomes complicated with like finding yourself as an artist. Your work might be about like exploring all these different approaches, and it's all this from the same voice. You see it in a lot of amateur artists. You're just imitating stuff you see, you're copying or you're playing around. Like I wouldn't buy work like that. I'm like, that's not the kind of work that I think is like we're talking about.
Okay, so it begs the question of like the blockchain adds some interesting things here because Picasso, right, was trained as a classical artist as a kid. Right. And he was making incredible work, but it was somebody else's. He was being trained to do this. And over time, he evolved and found his own unique expression. And of course, his expressions are in different periods are worth different pieces. The question is, as both an educator, an artist, and somebody who's on the blockchain, would your recommendation to say these new up and coming 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds who are now on this, do you just put your art on the blockchain right away, or do they let it evolve before you put something on? What do you do?
That's a great question. Yeah, no, you know what? I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. All I will say is like, I've been this is like kind of when you're 17, you shouldn't have to think about this stuff.
Right.
Like you are a brand. This is what I tell I have seniors, they're graduating. We talk about portfolio, getting jobs, what you're going to do after school. At the same time, you're making your thesis film and you're about to graduate. And like, that's when an art school, it's like, okay, you're about to leave. Like, what did you just learn? Like, What are you going to do? And kind of the obvious thing is like, all right, who am I? What am I selling? If I'm going to go out as an independent artist or I want to go get hired, like I'm basically teaching my students to like brand themselves. I'm like, yeah, you're a human being. You're complicated. You're infinite. Like your depths of magnitude to you, but you're also like, you are selling yourself in a marketplace of people and ideas. And like, if you're not thinking about that consciously, you're going to hurt yourself. So it's like, what's your name? What's your portfolio look like? What's your reel? Like, what's your one paragraph description about like and it's sort of this game of like, making the students discover like, oh yeah, all my work is kind of like gritty and like inspired by like, 70s, like noir, like it's like, oh yeah, I do have like a style and a point of view, and it feels stupid to write it down, and feels like, it's like, I don't want to label that's what I am, but it's like, that's kind of what you are, just like do it. Right. So for artists who are 17, they're like, I'm just going to make stuff and put it up online, blah, blah. It's like, that stuff's online forever. Like, don't put all your shit on Instagram either. Like curate like your brand. So like people can actually like appreciate your work and understand it. This is a constant lesson for me, and I think most creative people and maybe just brands in general, is like people don't have a lot of attention or a lot of time. Like you have to constantly remind them who you are and like show them your work and like keep it in front of people. And if you make it really complicated or confusing or hard to figure out or hard to find your work, like people won't see it, and you just won't be part of the conversation. So if I were an artist, I would just say like, be really simple, have a story to tell, and really think clearly about your journey, and that it's a different period. And maybe it's just my personality. Like I did not think about, this sounds so conceited, but it's true. Like I did not think about making money from like being an artist probably until I needed to.
Right.
Which is like, yeah, when you're like off your parents' healthcare and like, paying your own rent and completely, and like working full time, and like you're raising a family and stuff. Like for me, art was always a pure thing, and like exploration, and like it still is. But yeah, now it's like, oh wow, I can pay the bills with my art, and I don't have to do other work, so I can spend more time on my art. And again, the older you get, the more you realize like how limited your time is. Again, my work, I spend so much time on it. Like I don't have time to bounce around to do a bunch of different stuff or be really haphazard about what I'm minting. Like it has to be thoughtful.
you are in an interesting position because a lot of people can make work on digital images and they just, can put it out there real fast and they can make 20 in a day if they really wanted to. But with your art, it's physical and you're working on one piece a year.
That has been my fail-safe for sure, is that like if people have been reaching out to me for commissions last 10 years, it's like it's going to be like a 3 to 6 month commitment at least, and like no, right? And now too, where it's like, oh dude, like don't overmint, blah blah blah. It's like I can't, because I mean I'm not going to be able to flood the market with my work just because it takes so much time to do it. And yeah, that whole conversation about scarcity again, it's like it's what's right for my work. And same thing for traditional artists who are not taking the plunge into Web3 yet. It's like it was right for my work. Like it solved the problem that I needed. My painter friends can have gallery shows, sell paintings. Like they kind of have a path there where like mine was in a weird place.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of perfect for my work. And like that collection too of the individual stills from a film, everyone's like, oh, should I make a 10,000 collection, a 1,000 collection, a 5,000, a 100 edition? It's like my work is like 1,440 frames. Like that's what it is. So that's the size of the collection. Like it's not like I'm playing games. It's like that's what it is. You break it up into its parts. And so I'm not like stressing about that aspect of it.
Yeah. What are you working on now? Where are you in the process? What are you feeling about it? Because your work, you don't have a plan when you go into it. It evolves as it happens. So where are you in this?
Yeah, so I'm in like a really special place right now where I started a piece. So the long story is like I typically do these 1 minute films. They take like a year each. And then like when COVID hit and my child was born, like when you have a kid, at least for me, like the first year was like everything got screwed up, like with my schedule and how I work, and it was great and totally worth it. But it's like I had to focus on making smaller pieces. And I also think about the way my work's consumed. It kind of was a perfect way to kind of enter the Web3, where it's like I started making square format 5-second loops, because that's what kind of like works on Instagram and works on OpenSea, and kind of the way people consume a lot of like sort of, it's a GIF essentially rather than like a 1 minute looping animation that's like 16:9 wide image. And so I started making these little pieces, and I could do one of those in like 2 or 3 months. And so I made a bunch of those, and then that's when I got into NFTs. And some of my first editions were those Goodnight Moon and Still Life with Lemons, or some of those square pieces. And the one I just sold at Christie's was one of the square pieces. So August of last year was like finally the first time I was like, I can make like a year-long piece again. I just got into the space and sold some work and felt like kind of excited about what's happening. So I started last year. I just finished the the last drawing like 2 weeks ago. So it took a whole year.
Oh.
And I was doing it this is a whole nother story, but like I was a full-time professor and doing this Web3 stuff full-time and working on this piece full-time. I think everyone in the space in a way, but like 2021 was just like, wow. And so, yeah, I just finished this piece and I'm working on the sound design. So that's what I'm doing right now is sound. I always do that after I finish the animation. I do the sound for all my work. It's part of my work. It's part of what I'm selling. It's part of the piece. I dig what I'm doing right now. Like people like my sound design on its own. I can never do really sound work just as is. It's always tied to the work. But I always try to make it like it's looping work. I want it to be exhibited like in real life spaces. So it's not music. It's not sound effects. It's sort of this like sort of atmospheric complement to the visuals. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'll bring it up again. Not to like shill it or anything, but like that Night Vision series is the individual frames. It's my most affordable stuff. So like, again, the longer story too is like my stuff on SuperRare. I just sold my last one for 75 Ethereum on SuperRare. So like that stuff's skyrocketing. It's crazy and no one can afford it. Right. So like, the whole point of the series of like individuals is like, I have like 350 collectors through that and stuff. But people who collected them have the option to get a print from me, hand signed, of their NFT, a one-of-one print. It's so much work that it's like not my wheelhouse of like doing all this stuff, billing but I'm doing it, and so that's what I'm working on too, is like getting those organized and getting them printed, and then other secret stuff, and talking about that the market's great for artists right now, and it's like not a bear for the art. It's like I have meetings with marketplaces and DAOs every day the next 2 weeks. Wow. And I'm just taking meetings like I can tell everyone who's like not in the position I'm in, like there's a lot of people working on building stuff that's not launched yet. Like there's a lot going on. And if it feels like, from my perspective, it's like, I'm trying to remind myself, like, whoa, I'm in a really cool position where I have to say no to a lot of these people. Cause it's like all these things that are coming need established artists and need actual content and culture
and you're kind of boxed in because your work takes time.
That's right. And yeah, now it's sort of like going back to my students, it's like, I need to protect my brand as well. I feel really lucky that like a SuperRare is like really been around since like at least 2018. Like it's really hard to like know what's going to stick around. And again, too, like, I don't know how much time, we don't have enough time for it, but like if I was 17 years old and I just went through the year I went through, like there's a lot of tricky stuff to navigate, right? There's like scammers and hackers and bad actors and lots of technical stuff that you have to learn and lots of financial stuff. And like, you got to be smart. I think like a lot of this stuff makes sense now, but like setting up a wallet and like minting your own stuff on Manifold and understanding smart contracts and understanding market movements, it's like not where I was at when I was 17 alongside developing my authentic art. And so,
yeah, there's a lot happening. And I think just what you said there, Jake, I'm bullish on this space. People are building way behind the scenes right now. It's a beautiful time for artists, and we're seeing more and more artists jump into the space. And I'm excited to see when your next piece comes out, obviously. And we'll have all the links in the description so people can go check that out, check out your work. And thanks so much for spending some time.
Yeah, I'm teasing stuff. Thank you for having me. I'll just say, yeah, Twitter is obviously the best place to follow my work in Web3. And I try to post work, often. So follow me on Twitter and you'll see most of my stuff.
It's fantastic. I think you just retweeted something today. So, yeah.
Cool. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening. I just want to say I'm so sorry about the audio on that one. I thought my mic was plugged in and it took my audio from a different microphone, which is very awkward, and I'm so sorry. If you want to come hang out with us online, you can find a Discord link in the description of this episode. Also, please share this episode with any aspiring artists you think need to hear Jake's timely and wise words. Also, thanks for subscribing and hanging out with us. I hope to hang out with you in the next episode. This is Phosphorus, signing off. Thanks for dropping in.